It's that time of year where in the baseball industry, a lot of people are talking about prospects, and MLB Pipeline, which is kind of MLB.com's prospect evaluation engine, ranks Kyle Harrison, the Giants' starting pitching prospect, as the best left-handed pitcher prospect in baseball. So we're going to get into what they had to say about Harrison and the Giants farm system overall next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes actually 3 days a week for now, back to 5 days a week when pitchers and catchers report, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and RotoGraphs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, or at least 3 days a week for now. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And there's a lot I want to get to today. Given that we're only doing 3 days a week, there's often a lot that happens between episodes. And right now, I want to talk about the fact that MLB Pipeline, like I said, ranked Kyle Harrison as the best left-handed pitching prospect in the minor leagues. And lately I've been talking about this a lot, how I just think that the state of the Giants system is being the belief that it's somehow in disarray or that they've taken huge step backwards, I think is overblown. And in fact, they've got some high-end talent pretty close to the major leagues, and Kyle Harrison is the prime example of that. So we're going to get into him, what MLB Pipeline had to say about him. Also, Scott Boras, Carlos Correa's agent, spoke out about this whole process and had some specific things to say about the Giants and the Mets, and we'll get into that as well, and some international signings for the Giants. But starting with Kyle Harrison, like I said, I think this is going to be a theme for the next couple weeks here because different sources are going to be putting out their top 100 prospects lists like really soon, and I think we're going to find that the Giants have some good talent here and that people are overreacting to what was a disappointing year for some in the system, whereas you've got a guy like Harrison who had the opposite of a disappointing year. He completely shot up to being a guy that a lot of people view as a potential front of the rotation arm, and he's right on the doorstep of the majors because he spent a lot of time in Double-A and dominated there. So he's probably going to start in Triple-A. And Farhan Zaidi has said that we could see him this year for sure, and it might even be early in the season. And so that is definitely something to be excited about for 2023. So as I said, MLB Pipeline ranks him number one among left-handed starting pitchers. I would imagine he lands probably in the top 20 when they release their top 100 prospects list. And what they had to say about Harrison, I mean, first of all, they ranked pitches. We'll get into the rankings of pitches, but and who among these prospects has the best individual pitches of different types. But they also rank superlatives, and they said the highest ceiling belongs to none other than Kyle Harrison. And they say Harrison projects as a frontline starter thanks to his 3-pitch repertoire that also includes an improving mid-80s changeup with fade and sink. He can dodge bats in the strike zone with all 3 of his offerings. Another superlative here that goes to Harrison, Rookie of the Year candidate. And they say the Giants don't have a slot available in their opening day rotation, but Harrison's stuff and performance, 2.71 ERA, 196 opponent average, 186 strikeouts in 113 innings, mostly in Double-A at age 20, will be difficult to deny. He continues to refine his control and command, though the quality of his pitches means that he doesn't have to be precise. And just continuing to scroll through, those are the superlatives, but now they rank, okay, who has the best fastball among left-handed pitchers in the minor leagues, and they give it a tie between Harrison and 3 others. They grade it at a 65 on the 20 to 80 scouting scale, 80 being the best, 20 being the worst, and they give Harrison's fastball a 65, and they say all 4 of these lefties have well above average fastballs that stand out in different ways. Harrison had a crazy 41% swing and miss rate with his heater in Double-A, working from 92 to 97 miles an hour with riding action and a flat approach angle from a low 3/4 arm slot. And moving on to the slider, they give Harrison the honor of the best slider, tied with one other pitcher, giving it a 60 grade. And what they write here is, if hitters concentrate on dealing with Harrison's fastball, he can make them look bad with a sweeping slider in the low 80s. And that's all they have to say about the pitch. But all of this to say, like, there's a lot of talk about how the Giants drafting has been terrible or whatever. The first round picks have not gone well, but when you look at a guy like Harrison, they were able to get him. Look, I'm not an expert on the draft by any means, and a lot of the guys who get drafted, I honestly have no idea who they even are at the time when they're drafted. My expertise is kind of mostly on the major leagues and guys who are close to the major leagues. There's certainly people out there that this is their focus. And so my understanding of how they even got Harrison in the first place was that they signed him. It wasn't a first round pick, but they signed him to an above slot deal, and they signed an under slot deal with their first round pick. So kind of in essence, he was like a first round pick. And so I wouldn't put too much emphasis on, oh, the first round hasn't gone well. I mean, it stinks, and you'd rather nail those picks, but the draft is kind of largely a crapshoot, is what it seems to me from the outside. And when you can draft, it doesn't matter where you draft these guys, but if you end up having some guys shoot through your system and have the kind of ceiling that they've gotten from Kyle Harrison, at least projecting forward the kind of ceiling we think he could have, then it's hard for me to complain too much about that draft. And so obviously it's to be determined how he's actually going to perform. And of course, injuries happen all the time with pitchers, but I don't know. I mean, you've got a huge upside left-handed pitching prospect here in Kyle Harrison, who's close to the major leagues, probably going to debut in 2023. And yes, he's a kind of sneaky under the radar rookie of the year candidate. And it might not even be that sneaky. I think to a lot of Giants fans, it might be sneaky, but in the industry and the prospect evaluating world, I don't think anyone would be too shocked if Kyle Harrison were to win the Rookie of the Year award. A lot of it depends on opportunity, because like the blurb mentioned there, they've got like 7 starting pitchers right now. Certainly 6. You've got some injury risk or concern or whatever with Anthony DeSclafani. You don't know exactly where he is. I don't know exactly where he is in his rehab. Of course, the Giants do know exactly where he is, but we're going to see Kyle Harrison, assuming kind of nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, an injury wouldn't be out of the ordinary, sadly, for pitchers. It happens. But I don't know. We're going to see him. I can't wait to get top 100 prospect rankings, because you're going to see Luciano and Harrison, arguably both in the top 20. And you've got some other intriguing guys like Casey Schmidt, who will probably appear on some top 100 lists as well. So I think the Giants farm system is not in tatters like some might lead you to believe. And that's what I want to say about that. But look forward to more prospect talk coming in the coming days and weeks as these rankings put out more and more information, as that it's prospect season around the league right now. So coming up in just a minute, I want to focus on what exactly did Scott Boras have to say about the Giants in terms of Carlos Correa, and in terms of a player, another one of his clients the Giants reportedly really wanted but didn't end up with. We'll get to what Scott Boras had to say in just a minute, but before we do, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football playoffs. Hello, you can bet on the 49ers and their hopefully deep run into the NFL postseason. That's all available at BetOnline. MLB offseason stuff, as always, there. And how about this? You can bet on the World Baseball Classic, which we haven't talked much about at all this offseason, but is coming up in a month and a half. We're going to see WBC action. That Team USA is absolutely stacked, and they are currently the favorites at plus 250 on BetOnline. Logan Webb on that team, by the way. So anyway, so much you can check out at betonline.net. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, as promised, I want to discuss a little bit about what is his name? Scott Boras. I wanted to call him Carlos Correa. What Scott Boras had to say about the Carlos Correa saga. So finally, like we've been saying all along, it was going to take until Correa had an official deal until we finally got some information. And there were some tidbits here. Scott Boras talking to USA Today about the whole saga. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yes, Scott Boras speaking on Carlos Correa and much more. Basically, the gist of it is that he blames the Mets. He doesn't really fault the Giants in this piece. This is in USA Today where I am getting this, and what the kind of famous line here is, quote, "I don't understand the Mets." And the rationale why Scott Boras doesn't understand the Mets is because they ended up consulting with the same doctor who consulted with the Giants and basically told the Giants, advised them against a long-term contract. And so Scott Boras is saying, why the heck did they, because they knew about the Giants' concerns, so why would they go to the same doctor and then have negotiated a deal that was 12 years and $315 million, and then go to the same doctor and then go, oh wait, no, never mind, we don't want to do this. And so I agree, that doesn't really look good. I don't know if the Mets knew it was the same doctor, but if they didn't, then what that tells me is that the Giants consulted with a good doctor, because it would be two teams like seeking the same doctor's opinion. Because my understanding of this doctor, reading through MLB trade rumors, is that, so his name is Dr. Robert Anderson. If you want to blame someone, not that he deserves blame, but if you want to circle someone and say, who caused this deal to fall apart, it's Dr. Robert Anderson. And again, I'm not saying go attack this guy by any means at all. I'm saying this is just the doctor who gave the opinion. And he's a Wisconsin-based foot and ankle specialist who also has ample experience working with NFL players. And so he was the orthopedist who consulted with team physicians for both San Francisco and New York. So anyway, I mean, the Giants have their foot and ankle guy, I guess, and he advised against a long-term deal. So what Boras said was essentially that you cannot blame the Giants because this doctor expressed an opinion. He says it was different with the Giants because a doctor had an opinion they didn't know about. But the Mets had notice of this. They knew the opinion of the Giants, so why did you negotiate when you knew or when you know this thing in advance? And then in this USA Today article, it goes on to say, quote, "The Giants never engaged in negotiations again with Boras, but the Mets still wanted to work out a revised deal." So we've heard, Farhan Zaidi has literally said a couple times now that they've kind of checked back in, but he's been it seems like there wasn't interest at that point. So my speculation is it's either one of two things. Either they just completely were not interested in Carlos Correa anymore, given the advice they got from this doctor, or the report they got from this doctor, which, by the way, he didn't examine Correa. It was based on an MRI. So they did an MRI of the leg, and then they sent it off to this doctor, and then that doctor reported back to the Giants. And the fact that they never engaged again suggests that they were just like, this is not the guy we want to invest in, sadly. Like, we obviously wanted him, but then this changes everything, the leg and the evaluation there. But the other possibility, and I've touched on this before, is that they may have kind of replaced his spot in the budget and reached some kind of limit, because what's suspicious here is that their payroll, according to Roster Resource on FanGraphs, projects at about $192 million. And what's interesting about that number, 192, is that it's $30 million above the number where they've been at the last few years, which is about $162 million. And so you might think, okay, great, they increased their payroll finally by about $30 million. But what's suspicious to me, it's it's not even suspicious, it's just like smoking gun, is that they are receiving $30 million from MLB's sale of its remaining stake in BAMTech to Disney for $900 million divided by 30 teams, each team getting $30 million. And so it's seemingly apparent to me that they've got some kind of budget at about 160 million, and this year maybe it went up to about 190 million, given they're getting an extra $30 million from this sale of this company. And so they spent, like, as soon as the Correa deal fell apart, they added Michael Conforto, they added Taylor Rogers for a combined roughly the same amount that Correa cost per year. Obviously a much shorter term, but it was, Correa was going to get like 27 million a year, and Conforto's getting 18 million a year, plus Taylor Rogers getting 11 million a year. So it adds up to about the same average annual value. And so it could just be they were like, well, we're spending that money elsewhere, and now we're not going to add another $30 million player or close to it. And plus that would push them into the luxury tax, which is calculated differently than the 190 million number I mentioned. Their luxury tax payroll right now is about 213. So about 20 million more, and they would be in the first luxury tax. They would cross the first luxury tax threshold. Anyway, just wanted to keep mentioning that because, it's relevant to me. But the other thing Boras said I wanted to mention is that, speaking of Brandon Nimmo, Scott Boras said, quote, "The Giants had strong interest in Nimmo." So we did have a report that the Giants had an offer on the table to Nimmo before he ultimately ended up signing a deal to return to the New York Mets. Nimmo was one of my kind of favorite free agents for the Giants to target. Apparently, they liked him quite a bit, and they didn't come away with him. And so when your offseason potentially could have been like Nimmo and Correa, and then other pieces as well. I don't think ever signing like two players, maybe Nimmo, Correa, and Taylor Rogers, and also you go out and you get Haniger or something, then I would feel better about that than what they've currently done. I think the guys they currently have with Haniger and Conforto, they have upside, but they also have downside. Nimmo is more, he's had injury history and concerns himself, like major ones. Missed a lot of time, but his maybe floor is a little bit higher when he is on the field than these other two, perhaps. I just really like Brandon Nimmo as a player, and they wanted him, but they're not getting him. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Boras kind of lets it all hang out here in this piece in USA Today. Apparently it was like a 2.5 hour interview that he did for this piece. So I would encourage you to check it out. USA Today by Bob Nightingale. The headline, "I don't understand the Mets. Scott Boras breaks down Carlos Correa saga." So anyway, coming up in just a minute, I want to talk about the Giants being active in the international market here, with International Signing Day being a couple days ago. They made a move. They made a lot of moves, but they signed one of the better prospects in the international market. We'll get into who he is and what it means in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Hello, yes, of course. Then you gotta try a Built Bar. And we just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is always to eat a little bit healthier. And if you're like me and you want to eat healthy, but you don't want to compromise taste, then I've got just the thing for you. You've got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, you've got to try these delicious bars. You won't think that they're good for you, I promise you. What makes them so good? For starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. Candy bar taste, seriously, in what is a healthy profile, incredible macros. Just in a typical bar, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. We've been talking for years about ordering them at Built.com. Now you can go to a Walmart or Sam's Club to get your Built Bar. That's right. Head to Walmart, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. And if you're near Sam's Club, you can get a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. Anyway, you can thank me later. All right, as promised, just quickly want to discuss the Giants being active in the international market here and signing, I say one of the better, but he was ranked 15th among international prospects according to MLB Pipeline again. But again, with these rankings, you never know. The Padres got the top guy a catcher in terms of the rankings. The Dodgers, I think, got the 3rd ranked guy, and the Giants come away with someone who was ranked 15th by MLB Pipeline. But still, a lot of international players signed. So to get one of the top 15 players is a good thing, right? There's 30 teams, and so you're not guaranteed to get a top 15 guy. And so the player's name is, man, I used to be much better at pronouncing Spanish, Rayner Arias, a 16-year-old right-handed hitter with power potential for whom the Giants have been tracking in the DR for more than 2 years. And I'm kind of reading this per Andy Baggerly in The Athletic. They signed him for $2.7 million. They had an international bonus pool of $5.284 million. And so about half of it, a little more than half of their pool going to one player here. So clearly the cream of the crop of these picks. And yeah, they signed, what did they sign? 23 international players on this day a couple days ago. And let's see, we're going to get a little bit of a report. This is coming from, oh God, his name is Salermo. I don't know exactly. He's somebody important. International Scouting Director, Joe Salermo, who talked to Andy Baggerly, and he had some things to say about Arias and the others. He says, quote, "We think Arias is a special guy, a combination of a power bat with hitting ability and a good makeup and good baseball IQ. We felt he had a good background and good family foundation. His father pitched in Double-A, and then I believe transitioned to a scouting career. Yeah, and so Salermo continues, says, quote, "Not only did his tools and baseball skills improve as he got older, but his data improved. All of that is part of the puzzle to evaluate players. The at-bats and consistent contact kept improving, along with bat speed and exit velocity. He didn't chase much, seemed to have good strike zone knowledge, and we've seen continual improvement." And then one of the comps, by the way, in this MLB Pipeline write-up on Arias is Eloy Jimenez of the Chicago White Sox. Now, it's a lofty comparison, but, tall outfielder who is athletic and has power and can play some good defense is where we're going here with this comp. And apparently Salermo didn't back away from the comp, says Baggerly. And Salermo says, quote, "He's a plus athlete who can play right field. We think he's capable of hitting 275, 280 with 20-plus home runs. The baseball skills are advanced enough to start in the U.S., but that's up to player development. We'll go work out in the U.S. for a few weeks, and they'll determine where to start him." So they signed a bunch of other guys, like I said, 22 other international players. This is one area where, bringing in Pete Patella from the Houston Astros, one of his heavy emphasis areas was the international market. And so the Giants aim to improve in this area. They've had some, high profile international signings, like Marco Luciano was an international signing, but they generally need to get better and not just focus on, Dominican Republic and Venezuela. I think they haven't kind of branched out to the whole world as much as maybe they ought to. And I think in this international period, they signed a player out of Taiwan and some other countries where they're usually not signing players as well. And so again, this is not my area of expertise, but it's good to see the Giants active here and signing one of the top players. Like I said, it kind of full circle here. The Giants farm system and developmental pipeline is really important, especially, again, tying into what we're saying. If they've got some sort of budget that's not super high in general, then it's going to be even more important. And by the way, I don't think that that's a good thing. I will be critical if that proves to be true. We'll see if they add payroll. We'll see if next year they slash it by $30 million to get back to around $160 million without this $30 million windfall. It could just be a coincidence. It could be that they were planning to go up anyway, but we will have to wait to find out. But if they do have if they're not going to be the Mets, just shoving money all over the place, then it's going to be important to, have a good developmental pipeline. And they keep talking about that. And so it is really important. And yeah, I had something else to say about that. Oh, it's not small market. I just want to be clear. It's more a little bit above mid-market behavior versus some people. It's not black and white thinking here. It's not you're either the Mets or you're the A's. You can be like in the middle. The Giants are more like middle and a little above in terms of spending generally. They're not the A's. They're not the Orioles. They're not the, the Pirates. It's just not true. Yes, they're not the Mets, or the Dodgers or even the Padres now, but they're not behaving like the A's. So that if you tell me that, I'm just going to ignore you because you're wrong. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Cannot wait to be with you again a couple more times this week, even more potentially if something happens, we'll see. So thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.